I'd like to start with how I always had a feeling inside of me that I didn't always fit in to certain situations like public school. Starting with public school, I remember thinking, I can't wait to get out of here. I didn't like being in a boxed in way. And yet I was intelligent. I was able to do well at school, but I always felt that there should be a connection between the subjects more holistically. And that frustrated me. So at a very early age, I wrote an article, like I think I was 16, that went in the newspaper. And it was about how I believed that schools should be held. It was my whole philosophy at that young age was what I thought our schools should be doing to make a connection with the students and a connection to life and make it more meaningful. Um, so that was the very beginning of my search for a purpose in life. Uh, and at that time, I ended up going with my friends to Colorado and living in Colorado. My parents were in the middle of a divorce. It was time for me to get out of my suburban town. It was near Ossining, New York. And we ended up living in Manitou Springs under Pikes Peak. And you could say I was in the hippie days because I was. And so it was kind of a free live as whatever you want to. There wasn't any structure. It was just find your way. Um, and while I lived with this couple, I ended up buying their horse from them because they wanted to keep it in the family. And I had a horse and I rode in the mountains and I was living a pretty freestyle hippie life. And at that time, all I thought about was that I wanted to be in love and I wanted to be happy. So I didn't really have any specific goal for my life, but my father was working on a sailboat. And this wasn't just any sailboat. This was a 95-foot gaff-rigged sloop. It was called the Clearwater. It was known as Pete Seeger's boat because Pete Seeger, a famous folk singer, had a vision to clean up the Hudson River and build a boat that was a replica of the boats that sailed in the 1800s. And these were like cargo boats. They would load up with pumpkins and produce, and they would sail from Albany, New York, down to South Street Seaport and sell their produce at the market. So he wanted a boat that would bring back the old days and help people care about pollution on the Hudson River. So I got very involved too. And as my father started writing to me, found out that they needed a cook. And my father was a sailing master and said, "We can't hire you. That would be nepotism." But that same time period, their cook quit and they were up the creek without a paddle. And they ended up hiring me. So I left Colorado. I went to New York. I started working as a deckhand and as a cook on a big wooden sloop. And I had to learn all about the ropes and the rigging and the sailing songs. And that's where my love of music really took off because this boat was full of musicians. People would come, people that were famous would give concerts for the boat, like Don McLean, who wrote American Pie. I even got to have a shower at his house because the crew didn't have running water. We had no showers except for the people on shore who would invite us. So Don McLean invited the crew to have a shower at his house. And we met other people, Arlo Guthrie, musicians that had messages. The music was very different. It was always a song with a purpose and a message about a lot of times it was about the environment. So that became my world. My world was the ocean and cleaning up the environment and having a future for the next generation. the thought that if we didn't do something, the next generation wouldn't have much to live for. And we even had a song that was about it won't take much, but you gotta have some. The old ways help, the new way come. Better leave a little water for the next in line. You better leave a little water from another time. So in that, it's like a message that was being ingrained in me. We had to care about this earth. However, I ended up going on to college from there to be a marine biologist. And that work that I was going into became so competitive. It seemed like everybody wanted to sail with Jacques Cousteau, and everyone wanted to be a marine biologist. And I left that work. I couldn't stay with that school. It got harder and harder. By my third year, I had started with all A's, but by my third year, it was like, no, I don't want to do chemistry. I called it commisery. And it was at this time that I started looking for God. So I was in my third year of college and not understanding why God, if there was a God, would let the earth get so war-torn and so polluted, and everybody seemed to have ego-driven lives. And I'd already been into at least 2 relationships that were heartbreakers. And I wanted to know what real love was, and I wanted to know what holiness was. So I began fasting and praying. And at this point, I'd left my one college and I'd gone back to my earlier college, and I just didn't know what to take. I was purposeless. I was confused, and I was involved with meditating and trying different religions. But they didn't exactly give me enough hope. They mostly, they were mostly works oriented. If you could fast long enough, then you could make it. But I didn't know that at the time, so I fasted for about 30 days, maybe even more. And it broke down my health. My mother found out. She said, come home and stay here. So now I had to go back and stay with my mother, which I didn't want to do. My mother and my stepfather. And at that time in my life, I wasn't very warm toward my stepfather. And they thought they could cure my brokenness by sending me to a shrink who put me on medications like tranquilizers. And that didn't do a thing. And I kept reading the Bible. And I was pretty desperate. I would read the Bible, but I wouldn't know how to interpret it. I would read that if you ever lusted after someone, you should pluck out your eye. And I remember thinking, well, Lord, I really can't pluck out my eye. But I do love you, and I should pluck out my eye, but I just can't. What is wrong with me? So you can see that I was reading the scriptures almost literally, and I was very, very desperate to find out how to please God, but I was coming at it at a works-oriented mindset that I had to fast my way, or I had to hurt myself somehow, pluck out an eye. I didn't understand how God could love a broken sinner. But God had a window open for me that I had no idea. And during that time, a neighbor brought me up to her getaway retreat in New Hampshire. She said to my mother, you don't want to be around Marilyn. You need a break. I'll take her. And in her beautiful heart, she took me under her wing. She brought me to a precious place, a log cabin on a lake. And as I stayed there, this was my turning point. This log cabin on a lake was the place where I started to say, well, God, if you're not real, I don't know what to do. You have to be real to me. And I was going to storm heaven, so to speak. because I really felt like at this log cabin, it was my last stop. Like, once I'm here, if I don't find peace, if I don't find answers, I don't know what I'm going to do. So that weekend, she had her sons there. They were having a beer party in her cabin, and one of them followed me upstairs to the bedroom, and he said, "Hi," and he was about to kiss me, and I said, "Why do you want to kiss me? Do you love me?" And he backed off, and I said, "Do you know what love is? Do you know that love is powerful and love is like holy?" I don't know why I said that, but I did. And he's like, "I'll see you later," and he left. So, so that was pretty good. Um, but that that night, after the drunken beer party was simmering down, I went for a walk, and I walked under the stars, and I came to the center of this town. It was called Harrisville, New Hampshire. And I saw a little church in the middle of the town, and I laid down on the grass in front of the church, and I looked up at the stars. And as I gazed up in the stars, I cried out, "Please, God, show me who you are. Please, God, show me the purpose of life, and help me understand why you have allowed evil on this planet. Because I know I believe that if I believe in you at all, you're a God of love. But then why is there war and suffering? And why is everything so out of harmony?" So as I said that prayer, sometimes in my mind and sometimes out loud, I finally felt like this peace. I'm looking at the stars and I'm finding this order. There's perfect order in the heavens. And I had this feeling that God was with me somehow. And I walked back from that place and I slept for a few hours. And then it was breakfast time. And the neighbor across the street called and invited us over. And in the morning, the mother of the log cabin, the lady who had taken me there, had just come up. And she said, "Let's go across the street and have breakfast." So we go over to the neighbor and we're having breakfast. And he says, "Well, tell me about you. What are you all about? Why are you up here at this log cabin anyway?" So I just said, "Well, I don't know. I was a sailor. I lived on a boat, but I'm actually looking for meaning in life and I'm trying to find God." And then he just handed me like a plate of bacon and I said, "No, no, I don't eat meat." And suddenly something clicked in his mind and he said, "You remind me of my niece and she's a Seventh-day Adventist." And I said, "What are they?" I didn't know what a Seventh-day Adventist was. Uh, I'd heard of them once, but I really didn't know. So he said, "Well, they're having a convention up the hill and I'm going to drive you up there." And I said, "What? What do you mean they're having a convention?" And he said, "Well, they're all meeting up there and every year they have these special conventions and they're probably having it this weekend. So come on after we eat, get in the car, I'll drive you up there." So I get in his little red convertible and he drives me up and he says, "Now pay attention because you're going to have to walk back. I'm not going to come back for you. You can stay as long as you like. You're on your own, kid." So he drives me up this country road and then another road that is like a huge driveway. It goes on for a mile. And at the top, there's a mansion. And I'm at a place called Mount Missionary. And I can't believe it. I get out of the car and I feel like Maria in The Sound of Music, the beauty of the hills. Like everywhere, there was a mountain in the background, there was a field, there were pine trees. It was gorgeous. And then people were walking out of the mansion. So I get out of the car and I turn to Eric and I say, "Aren't you going to come in with me?" He says, "No, I'm an atheist." I told you I was an atheist. You can have fun finding God, not for me. And he drove away. So now I'm up there looking at people walking out of this mansion, and they'd just been in a service, a chapel service. And this man who had this face that was aglow with peace. There was something about this man. He just looked so peaceful and happy. And I looked at him and I said, I'm here to find out about God. And he smiled and he said, well, you've come to the right place. Sheila, take this girl under your wing and bring her down to the women's dorm and have lunch with her. So she brought me down to a house and we had lunch, and it was all vegetarian. And it was the first time I had ever been in a place that was so beautiful, and it just seemed like these were the people who knew the truth. And then they ate this vegetarian diet that was so balanced and so healthy looking and showed a lot of wisdom in preparing it. And I was really impressed. And then she brought me to a living room where we had prayer. And I told her about how I had been fasting, how I'd, become like anorexic practically. I was like 99 pounds. I told her that I was trying so hard to be holy and I didn't know what to do. And when I read the Bible, I felt that I was too unholy to come to God. And she said, well, don't you know that that's why Jesus died? That's the whole point of the gospel. And I said, no. She said, Jesus knows that you can't make yourself holy. And then she started opening the Bible and then reading all the scriptures that had never been really open to my mind. How, God would send Jesus to forgive us of our sins and to cleanse us. But it was Jesus who does the work, not us. And she really pointed out righteousness by faith. And then she said, he'll do the work for you. Are you willing to invite him into your heart and let him do the work for you? And I said, yeah, definitely. So we had prayer, and it was a special moment there that I guess I'll never forget. I know I'll never forget, because after that, I just was excited. Now I felt that I had already begun a new life, that I was going to find answers, that I was going to find purpose, and that most of all, I was going to find Christ would make me whole or holy. And so I ended up eventually living there, not immediately, but about a month later, they invited me to come up and live there. And I did. And I worked in the bakery, and I sang in the chapel, and I worked in the garden. I learned a lot about canning and preserving food. And, one of the most important things I was learning there was the answer to my deep, deep questions. Because I was one of these people that I could drive you crazy with questions. Questions like, will there be dogs in heaven? Or questions like, why would God allow this? And it always had to do with the evil one. Why would God allow Satan to hurt and tempt mankind when he loves us and he knows we're so frail, we're so easily led astray? And they would always point me to the certain books of Ellen White. And pretty soon I found that one of the most important books was The Great Controversy, because that really did answer my questions. That opened my mind to the conflict that began from Genesis to Revelation, the conflict between Satan. That it really wasn't about me at all. It was about God and Satan, and how he wanted to ruin life for mankind so that we wouldn't understand God's love and we wouldn't have a relationship with God. But here I was at a place that obvious that we could have a relationship with God. So I got baptized in October, and there's a lake right behind that area. And it was cold, but it was beautiful. And I just felt like I was now like John the Baptist. I had been created anew, and I was going to testify now of the saving grace of God to anyone. So that was the real beginning of me becoming a Christian, an Adventist, and having a really deep understanding that that we don't make ourselves holy, that it is Jesus that does the work in us, and it's always by His Spirit. It's righteousness by faith. And yet, even though we were taught that, the thing about Mount Missionary is that they were also doing a works thing. They were legalistic to such an extreme that I didn't always fit in, and I wasn't used to so many rules. I had been living pretty free, Colorado and the mountains and on a boat. And in those days, sometimes we even hitchhiked. We did whatever we wanted. And suddenly I was in a place that had become very rule bound. And sometimes I didn't know what the rules were. And one of the rules was don't walk with a man or with the opposite sex. And I wasn't trying to flirt or to cheat in any way on their rules, but I just didn't always see them. And so one day I was walking back from the bottom of the driveway, and a young man was coming down, and he said, "Oh, I'll walk you back." And he walked back with me. And that week they had me leave. So that was hard for me because I was embracing the truth, but I wasn't embracing the legalism part of it. So I didn't totally fit in, even though I loved the place and I loved the people. I guess I had some more processing to do to know what my purpose was, because it didn't fit there completely. But I was so grateful for what they gave me. And then from there, I prayed that God would lead me into a mission work. And He did. I ended up being invited to a place. The daughter I had met at Mount Missionary, but now she was a little bit younger than me, and her father ran a health food ministry. So now it was my turn to finally jump into a mission field that was going to share Jesus out there on the street or out there in a medical missionary way. And I was so excited. So they had a place in Minnesota, and when she invited me, I was ecstatic. I couldn't believe I was going to get to work in a health food store. Her father was a chiropractor and her mother was a nutritionist. Their names are Frank and Rosalie Hurd. And Frank and Rosalie Hurd had two health food stores, one in Hibbing and one in Chisholm, Minnesota. So it was a great work. When I started working there, I was really experiencing more of the Holy Spirit than I ever had in my life. Because as you minister to others, it seems that God gives Himself to you more fully. And so every day that I went into this health food store, I would study. I would study books that they had and healing remedies. And then I would pray and ask God to show me how to share. And people would come in with health issues like stomach ulcers or trouble sleeping. And I would be able to direct them. Have you tried aloe vera? Have you tried changing your diet? Have you tried L-tryptophan? And have you tried eating celery in a green drink? And I would give them not just advice, but we had a little bar that made smoothies and juices and veggie burgers that we made ourselves. And so people would come in all the time with questions and ideas and wanting to make health changes. And at that time, I got a great picture of how God did not abandon us when we became sick. I saw a God of love that was always there with a remedy. And I sound very simplistic, but that's how I saw it. It's like when we are in a fallen world. So when we encounter a disease or an enemy to our body or anything, that God really lifts up a standard or he provides. And I was starting to really awaken to that God truly has a remedy for everything. He has a remedy for how to stay well too, so you don't keep getting sick. Prevention. But that was my favorite work to be in. It just made me come alive. It made me feel like Jesus knew how to put his spirit in me as I prayed, and I knew how to understand what he was showing me. And some of it was very intuitive, and some of it was doing a lot of reading and studying, and some of it was learning from all the other people around me who were in that health food work. So that I stayed there for quite a while, but for at least a year and a half. And that's where I wrote the song Enoch, because at Mount Missionary, we walked under the stars at night. It was very cold in the winter. But walking under the stars always made me feel so close to God. And I had already read the book of Genesis and the story of Enoch, but I also read what Ellen White wrote about Enoch, and I was really impressed. And I said to myself, is it possible that all of us were meant to walk with God the way Enoch did? So I asked that one night walking under the stars. I said, God, were we meant to walk with you the way Enoch did? Was that your original plan for man, that our hearts and our minds would be so in tune with you that you would finally say, this person doesn't even belong on earth anymore. They belong with me. And that just impressed me so much, but I felt so unworthy and so humble at the same time. I was like, me, God? Really? But he impressed me that, yes, even you, even you. So that was a beautiful time. And God showed me something else too. There was a young man there who was interested in a courtship. He took me to meet his parents. And after I met them, we went to a wedding with them that weekend. In the middle of this wedding, the Holy Spirit was talking to me, and he said, do you believe that I created one man for one woman? And I said, yeah, I do. And then he said, do you believe that I could be your husband and I could supply all your need for a husband, and you would put me first? I said, yes, absolutely. And then I heard God say, well, would you be willing to let go of this boy, Jeff, if I really show you that you have to wait on me? And he said it in such a loving way. It wasn't discouraging. It was just like an adventure, like, let go and trust me. So I said, yes, all right. And then God said, see that red-haired girl? That's the one I'm intending for Jeff. And there was a girl with like long, curly red hair. And I'd never met her, but God was showing me just the back of her head at the wedding. He was like, that's the person. And who knows if this was an impression or not, but it was enough of a conviction that God did not want me to be courting this young man. And courtship was a whole new thing to me anyway, but now I was in this self-supporting work, and we believed in courting. We didn't just date. So I was impressed to wait on God. And during that time, I had to leave, because if I stayed at Northern Lights, where this work was, I would always be in Jeff's face. Um, so I told Rosalie and Frank, and they found another self-supporting work near Wildwood, Georgia. And I went to Wildwood. I got on a bus within 2 days. So strange, but I felt like I was obeying the Lord, and I went to Georgia. Um, and I had the privilege of sitting under the feet of Elder Frazee and hearing this man preach like no man had ever preached in my world. Yeah, he was an incredible gospel minister. And he was at the hospital and sanitarium in Wildwood. And I was at a place next door to that. They called it Sunshine Center. Um, and I preferred working out in the garden, cooking and singing to all the other possibilities that were out there. I just enjoyed that. So, yeah, in about a year's time, word got out that a woman in New York that I had met while I was at Mount Missionary was now running a bakery for New York, and she needed someone to come and work with her. So she actually sent me a letter and called me and said, "Will you come help me in this bakery? We'll have our own place." Actually, we didn't, but but we were making bread for the brand new restaurant that had just opened up. It was now 1982, I think, or 83, probably 82 or 83. And Country Life Vegetarian Restaurant had opened up in New York under all the guidance of Ellen White's writings, of Counsel on Diet and Foods, of the Three Angels message, of the fact that the cities needed to be reached. So I moved down to New York. It was Putnam, New York, and I worked for Carol Marno, baking bread from 5 in the morning until the sun went down. We baked all kinds of breads. They were all whole grain, whole wheat, and oat and Heidelberg rye, and breads with sunflower seeds in them, and sprouts and carob. And we were experimenting and enjoying making these wholesome breads and believing that we were also, with every loaf, we prayed every time we sent them out that God would bless the bread. And in giving the bread, people would think of the bread of life. So it really, really did feel like an important ministry, which ended up moving to go closer to Manhattan. So the whole team ended up moving to a farm in New Jersey. I moved with them. Jennifer moved there. Pretty soon I got to know Jennifer even better. And we were going into the restaurant now, which wasn't something I was excited about. I didn't want to go into Manhattan. I preferred being in the country. I was happy working and staying on a farm. But the work called all of us to the restaurant. So we would pile in a group of, I forget how many, but we sometimes had to sit on each other's laps. And we'd drive from this farm in New Jersey through the earliest time that we could to miss the rush hour traffic. And we'd be at 123 Trinity Place, opening up a restaurant that I'm told it served up, well, not up to, more than 500 customers a day. So the skeleton crew was serving hundreds of people every day. And so we went in, and we started with prayer, and then we would prepare an all-you-can-eat breakfast for the people in the Wall Street district. We were right around the corner from the Twin Towers. We were right around the corner from Battery Park. And I could even walk down there and say, "Hey, I used to sail by Battery Park on the Clearwater." So it was very interesting to think of how God had led me from the world of sailing to now the world of witnessing that the real cleansing isn't the Hudson River. It's our lives, it's our hearts, it's our minds. It's learning how to have a real relationship with God. So I'm thinking my time is going to be up soon, and I don't want to go on and on. So I'm going to come to a stopping place here, leaving you that I will say that for that time period, I worked at Country Life. I met wonderful people. We had baptisms. People would come out to the farm in New Jersey, and we would get out our guitars and we would sing with them. And they would express a desire to know God, a God of love and a God of abundant life, and a God that had a health message. It was drawing a lot of people. We had people from Norway and France and India and Jewish people and city, stockbrokers and bankers and just all kinds of paths in life that would come into the restaurant and be drawn to get to know us better. And we would witness not many, many baptisms, but we would witness baptisms. So that was always a joy. And I believe that many of these people are still walking with God, and they've also heard the message of not raising your family in the city, having a quieter life, a more peace-centered life, not running after the money like the rat race does, but finding an abundant life. So I'm going to close there. There's so much more of the mission. But I feel that I've probably spoken long enough for this session, and I'm going to end with a song. When we were in Country Life, there were some people from France, and they were born again. They were exciting young people. They wrote their own songs. And one girl wrote a song called Paradise Lost, Paradise Found. And Jennifer Jill Schwarzer put it into English. And it's kind of a favorite. So I'm going to sing that one at the request of a friend. I wish I could sing it in French because it's more beautiful in the original French language. A garden of green with flowering trees, inundated with life. It was paradise. I'm sorry, I have to stop. Sorry, I had one string, it dropped down to a D. A garden of green with flowering trees, inundated with life. It was paradise. Feathered birds of the air, and the river so fair, all in soft rainbow hues, made it too good to lose. Oh, I would find it again, the paradise lost to fallen man. Oh, I would find it again, that paradise lost, for lost I have been. In the midst of their home stood a tree all alone. God had said of that tree, of its fruit do not eat, but the tempted ones ate, and they were sorry too late, for the garden was lost, such as error had cost. Oh, I would find it again, that paradise lost to fallen man. Oh, I would find it again, the paradise lost, for lost I have been. And the first dying leaf made a great wave of grief to the man and his wife, for they had forfeited life. But in God's perfect plan, He extended His hand and restored to them life through the man Jesus Christ. Oh, it is ours once again, that paradise lost to fallen man. For now we are paradise bound, for the paradise lost is the paradise found.